Get out of my seat, boy! Patricia Montgomery snatched David's laptop bag and hurled it down the aisle. The bag exploded open. Papers flew everywhere. His phone skittered across first-class carpet like a hockey puck. David Williams sat frozen in seat 2A, his faded Northwestern hoodie a stark contrast to the pristine cabin. Patricia loomed over him, designer heels clicking as she stepped on his scattered documents. "I fly this route every month," she declared to the gathering crowd. "I know who belongs in first class." Flight attendant Jessica rushed over. Passengers turned, phones rising. The morning departure gate buzzed with whispers. David remained eerily calm. He reached for something in his jacket pocket. Patricia smirked triumphantly. "Finally learning your place? Have you ever seen someone's most humiliating moment become their most powerful? Because what unfolded next became one of the most incredible real-life stories of quiet justice I've witnessed." The digital departure board glowed overhead. Flight 468. Departure 23 minutes. Patricia straightened her blazer and addressed the cabin like a courtroom. "There's obviously been some kind of mix-up with the reservations." She gestured dismissively at David. "This gentleman seems confused about seating arrangements." David quietly showed his boarding pass to Jessica, the flight attendant. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Ma'am, I believe this is seat 2A. Let me see that." Patricia lunged forward, trying to grab the boarding pass. Jessica stepped between them, her training kicking in. "Ma'am, please return to your seat while I sort this out." "My seat?" Patricia's voice climbed an octave. "That is my seat. I have status with this airline. I've been flying first class longer than he's probably been alive." A passenger in 3B held up his iPhone, finger hovering over the record button. Another woman across the aisle whispered to her husband, loud enough to be heard, "This is getting uncomfortable." The phone started recording. Patricia noticed the attention and played to her audience. "I'm not being unreasonable. I just think there's been an honest mistake." She smiled sweetly at David. "Maybe you're supposed to be in coach? It happens all the time." David's messenger bag lay open on the floor, its contents scattered. Among the papers, a careful observer might notice something unusual: multiple boarding passes clipped together. A platinum airline status card peeked out from beneath a folder marked with corporate letterhead. His phone buzzed against the carpet. The screen lit up. "Board meeting moved to 9 a.m. Sorry for short notice. Sarah, executive assistant." "See?" Patricia pointed at the scattered papers. "He's obviously traveling on business. Companies buy the cheapest tickets for their employees." The way she said employees dripped with implication. Jessica knelt to help gather David's belongings. She glimpsed the platinum card and paused, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. She'd seen plenty of frequent flyers, but platinum status was rare, reserved for customers who flew over 75,000 miles annually. The passenger recording had started an Instagram live stream. The viewer count ticked upward: 238, 389, 542 people watching in real time. Comments began flooding in. "Karen alert! This is disgusting. Get her off the plane. Why isn't security here?" Departure, 18 minutes. "Ma'am," Jessica addressed Patricia, "I need to verify both boarding passes with our gate agent. This will just take a moment." "Finally." Patricia crossed her arms. "Though I don't see why my ticket needs verification. I've been flying American for 15 years. David remained seated, unnaturally composed for someone being publicly humiliated. He watched Patricia with an expression that seemed almost studious, like he was taking mental notes. The Instagram live viewer count jumped: 891, 1,238, 1,583. A flight attendant from coach walked up the aisle and whispered something to Jessica. Both women glanced at David, then at Patricia, their faces unreadable. "What's the holdup?" Patricia demanded. How long does it take to confirm that someone's in the wrong seat? She turned to address the other first-class passengers. I'm sorry you all have to witness this. Some people just don't understand airline etiquette. A businessman in 1A shifted uncomfortably. The woman in 3C stopped pretending to read her magazine. David's phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID was visible. American Airlines Corporate Security. He declined the call. Patricia noticed and pounced. See? He's avoiding calls from the airline, probably because they're trying to tell him about the seating error. The Instagram Live comments were getting more heated. This is straight-up racism. Document everything. Someone call the news. Where is airport security? Departure. 15 minutes. Ground crew member Mike appeared at the boarding gate entrance, radio crackling. Jessica waved him over urgently. We might need security, she whispered. Patricia overheard and nodded approvingly. Good. This has gone on long enough. David finally stood up. The cabin fell silent. He was taller than he'd appeared while seated, with a quiet presence that somehow commanded attention despite his casual clothes. Ma'am, he said to Patricia, his voice steady and calm, I understand your frustration. Flying can be stressful. Patricia blinked, caught off guard by his measured tone. But I think, David continued, reaching into his jacket pocket, there might be more to this situation than appears on the surface. The Instagram Live viewer count hit 2,341. Security Officer James Rodriguez approached with measured steps, his hand resting casually on his radio. Behind him, Gate Agent Rebecca Chen clutched a tablet, her screen displaying passenger manifests. The Instagram live stream had exploded. Viewer count, 4,672 and climbing. Comments flew past faster than anyone could read them. What seems to be the issue here? Officer Rodriguez's voice carried the practiced calm of someone who'd handled hundreds of airline disputes. Patricia stepped forward immediately. Thank goodness. This man is in my assigned seat. I've shown my boarding pass multiple times, but your staff seems reluctant to resolve this simple mix-up. She gestured toward David with theatrical exasperation. I understand mistakes happen, but I have a connecting flight in Chicago. I can't afford delays because someone doesn't understand how airline seating works. The businessman in 1A pulled out his phone and started recording too. The woman in 3C leaned forward, not even pretending to look away anymore. David remained standing, hands at his sides, watching the scene unfold with that same studious expression, like a scientist observing an experiment. Sir, I'll need to see your boarding pass and identification, Officer Rodriguez said. Of course. David reached into his back pocket, moving with deliberate slowness. Patricia whispered loud enough for the cameras to catch. Finally, some people need to learn there are consequences for trying to game the system. The gate agent Rebecca was furring at her tablet, scrolling through screens with increasing confusion. She tapped Jessica on the shoulder. His reservation shows some irregularities, she whispered. What kind of irregularities? Jessica whispered back. Multiple entries, different booking codes, and his frequent flyer status is... Rebecca squinted at the screen. This doesn't make sense. Departure, 9 minutes. A news blogger named Jennifer Torres had joined the Instagram live stream. She screenshotted key moments and posted them to Twitter with the hashtag #FirstClassRacism. Within minutes, her followers began retweeting. The original stream viewer count, 7,890. Ma'am, while we sort this out, could you please take your assigned seat? Officer Rodriguez addressed Patricia. My assigned seat is 2A. That's what I've been trying to tell everyone. Patricia's composure was cracking. Her voice carried a sharp edge now. She pointed at David. Look at him. Does he look like someone who flies first class regularly? I mean, honestly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. The businessman in 1A stopped recording and stared at Patricia with open disgust. David's phone rang. He glanced at it. American Airlines Legal Department. Again, he declined the call. "Sir," Officer Rodriguez said, "I notice you're receiving multiple calls from the airline. Is there something you'd like to share?" Patricia jumped in before David could answer. "See? They're obviously calling about the seating error, probably trying to relocate him to coach where he belongs." The Instagram Live comments had turned savage. This woman is unhinged. Someone needs to stop her. Record everything. This is going viral. Departure, 6 minutes. Senior flight attendant Mark Williams, no relation to David, emerged from the cockpit. He'd been monitoring the situation from the front of the plane, and his expression suggested this was beyond routine passenger conflict. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we're experiencing a slight delay while we resolve a seating issue. We appreciate your patience." Several passengers groaned. A man in 2C called out, "How long is this going to take? Some of us have connections." Patricia seized the moment. "Exactly. This is affecting everyone because one person won't accept they made a mistake." She turned to address the cabin directly. "I fly this route monthly for my job. I know the people who sit in first class. This isn't personal. It's just reality." The woman in 3C finally spoke up. "Ma'am, that's enough. You're being inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" Patricia whirled around. "What's inappropriate is having to argue for 20 minutes about a simple seating chart." David's phone buzzed with a text message. The screen was visible to Officer Rodriguez, who read it and froze. The text was from CEO Office, American Airlines. "David, saw the news alerts. Do you need corporate security? Sarah." Officer Rodriguez's eyes widened. He looked at David, then at his phone screen, then back at David. "Sir," he said quietly, "could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Patricia overheard. "Privately? Why does he get private conversations? I'm the victim here." Departure, 4 minutes. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Folks, we're going to need a few more minutes at the gate. Flight attendants, please prepare for a brief delay." Passengers throughout the plane began complaining loudly. The Instagram Live viewer count hit 12,338. #first-class racism was trending in 3 cities. David finally spoke, his voice cutting through the noise with quiet authority. "Officer Rodriguez, there's no need for a private conversation. I think it's time everyone understood what's actually happening here." He reached into his messenger bag, the same bag Patricia had knocked to the floor, and pulled out a leather folder. Patricia watched with growing unease. Something about David's sudden confidence unsettled her. "Ma'am," David said, addressing her directly for the first time with any authority, "I believe you said you know who belongs in first class." His tone had shifted, still calm, still measured, but now carrying an undertone of absolute certainty. The cabin fell silent. Even the Instagram Live comments paused as viewers sensed something significant was about to happen. David opened the leather folder. Patricia's smug expression began to falter. David Williams pulled out a business card and handed it to Officer Rodriguez. The security officer read it silently. His face went pale. He looked up at David, then back at the card, then up again. "Sir, I'm David Williams." His voice remained calm, but something had fundamentally shifted. The quiet man in the hoodie was gone. In his place stood someone accustomed to command. "Chief Executive Officer of American Airlines." The cabin erupted. Patricia's mouth fell open. The businessman in 1A dropped his phone. Jessica, the flight attendant, grabbed the nearest seat back for support. The Instagram Live comments exploded. "Holy shit! No way! CEO reveal. Plot twist of the year." Officer Rodriguez stammered, "Mr. Williams, we had no idea. Your appearance, My appearance isn't the issue here, officer. David's tone carried no anger, but absolute clarity. The issue is that I was trying to board my own airline's aircraft to attend our quarterly board meeting in Chicago, and I was publicly humiliated based on assumptions about who I am. He turned to Patricia, who had backed against the window, her face cycling through disbelief, horror, and dawning realization. Ma'am, you said you know who belongs in first class. You said you've been flying American Airlines for 15 years. David opened his folder wider, revealing documents marked Confidential, Board of Directors. Would you like to know how long I've been with American Airlines? Patricia couldn't speak. Her earlier confidence had evaporated completely. 23 years, David continued. Started in baggage handling at DFW. Worked my way through operations, customer service, regional management. Became CEO 14 months ago. The Instagram live viewer count had exploded to 18,943. Screenshots were flying across Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. #American Airlines CEO started trending nationally. Gate agent Rebecca was frantically typing on her tablet, pulling up David's passenger profile. Her screen confirmed what everyone was beginning to understand. Unlimited upgrades, platinum status for life, VIP handling codes attached to his reservation. This is impossible, Patricia whispered. You can't be... You're just... Just what? David asked quietly. Just a black man in casual clothes? Therefore, I couldn't possibly run a Fortune 500 company? The question hung in the air. Passengers throughout first class shifted uncomfortably. Several were now openly recording. David pulled out his phone and made a call. Sarah? Yes, it's me. I'm still on the plane. Can you conference in legal and corporate communications? We have a situation that needs immediate attention. He put the call on speaker. A crisp, professional voice filled the cabin. Mr. Williams, this is Jennifer Martinez from Legal. We've been monitoring social media. The incident is trending across multiple platforms. Patricia slumped into an empty seat, the fight drained out of her. Jennifer, David said, I'm here with approximately 30 witnesses, multiple video recordings, and a passenger who spent the last 25 minutes explaining to everyone why I don't belong in first class based on my appearance. We see the live stream, sir. Over 40,000 viewers now. Major news outlets are picking it up. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. Mr. Williams, this is Captain Sarah Chen. We're honored to have you aboard. Take all the time you need. David nodded toward the cockpit. Thank you, Captain. He addressed the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this delay. When I booked this flight, I expected a quiet trip to our Chicago headquarters. Instead, we've all witnessed something that happens far too often in air travel. Patricia finally found her voice. I didn't know. You were dressed so casually. I made assumptions. Yes, David said simply. You did. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. Sir, what would you like us to do about this situation? David looked at Patricia, who was now staring at her hands, the reality of her position settling in. Around the cabin, passengers waited. On Instagram Live, tens of thousands watched. What I'd like, David said, is for everyone to understand that this isn't really about me. I have the privilege of a job title that commands respect. But what about the thousands of passengers who experience this treatment without that protection? He pulled out another document from his folder. Our customer service reports show that 34% of black travelers report experiencing some form of bias during their journey with us. Today, we have an opportunity to address that statistic directly. Patricia looked up. What? What happens now? David studied her for a moment. Ma'am, that depends on what you choose to do next. You have two options. The cabin was silent except for the hum of the aircraft systems. Option 1. You can apologize publicly, to me and to everyone who witnessed this. We provide you with resources about unconscious bias, and you continue as a valued American Airlines customer. Patricia nodded frantically. Option 2. We document this incident officially. Your frequent flyer status would be reviewed. The recordings become part of our training materials on discrimination. The first option, Patricia said immediately. Please. I am so sorry. To you, Mr. Williams, and to everyone here. I made terrible assumptions based on prejudice. That was completely wrong. David nodded. Apology accepted. He turned to address the cameras still recording. But an apology isn't enough. Real change requires systematic action. David's phone buzzed with another call. This time he answered. This is David Williams. Yes, I'm aware it's trending. No, we're handling it appropriately. Actually, clear my schedule this afternoon. We're implementing some immediate policy changes. He looked around the cabin one more time. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today is going to become the foundation for meaningful change at American Airlines. Not because of who I am, but because of what we all learned about the assumptions we make. The Instagram Live viewer count had reached 38,329. David closed his folder and began gathering his scattered papers from the floor. Several passengers moved to help him. Now, he said, settling back into seat 2A, let's go to Chicago. Departure. 38 minutes delayed. As Flight 468 finally pushed back from the gate, David Williams opened his laptop. The Wi-Fi connected automatically. CEO privileges included unlimited high-speed internet on all American Airlines flights. Sarah, he said into his phone, patch me through to the executive leadership team, emergency video conference. Within minutes, his screen displayed 9 faces. The chief operating officer, head of human resources, general counsel, and 6 other senior executives. Their expressions ranged from concern to barely concealed panic. David, said Chief Operating Officer Michael Torres, we've been monitoring the situation. American Airlines CEO has over 2.3 million mentions in the last hour. CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC are all running the story. David adjusted his laptop screen so the other passengers couldn't see the conference. Patricia, now seated in 2C, occasionally glanced over with obvious anxiety. Here's what we know, David began, pulling up real-time data on his screen. The original Instagram live stream reached 838,000 unique viewers before it ended. Secondary videos have been shared over 156,000 times across platforms. We're looking at approximately 12.7 million total impressions. Head of Human Resources. Angela Rodriguez leaned forward on screen. David, from a liability standpoint, this could expose us to significant discrimination lawsuits. Not just from you, but from other passengers who've experienced similar treatment. That's exactly why we're going to get ahead of this, David replied. Legal, what's our exposure? General Counsel Jennifer Martinez appeared on screen with a stack of files. Conservatively, based on similar incidents in the industry, we could see class action suits worth $200, $400 million. The United dragging incident cost them $1.4 billion in market cap within 24 hours. David nodded grimly. Which is why we're not just responding. We're leading. I want comprehensive reform implemented before we land in Chicago. The executives exchanged glances. Michael Torres spoke up. David, that's ambitious. Major policy changes usually take months of review. We don't have months. We have 2 hours of flight time. David's voice carried absolute authority now. Angela, what would immediate anti-bias training look like? Angela Rodriguez consulted her notes. We could implement mandatory training for all customer-facing employees within 30 days. 127,000 team members across 350 airports worldwide. Estimated cost, $43 million. Approved. What else? Real-time bias reporting system, suggested Chief Technology Officer Kevin Park from the screen. Passengers could report incidents directly through our app, with guaranteed executive response within 4 hours. Development time, 6 weeks. Implementation cost, $18 million. Approved. Legal. What about accountability measures? Jennifer Martinez had clearly been preparing for this question. Zero tolerance policy for confirmed discrimination incidents. First offense, mandatory sensitivity training and probation. Second offense, termination. We'd need to update 50,000 employee contracts. Do it. What's our timeline? With expedited review, 72 hours for legal documentation, 2 weeks for full implementation. Patricia shifted nervously in her seat. She could hear fragments of the conversation, millions of dollars, policy changes, legal reviews. The magnitude of her actions was becoming clear. David pulled up another screen. Marketing. I need crisis communication strategy, but not defensive, proactive. We're not apologizing for this incident. We're using it as a catalyst for industry-leading change. Chief Marketing Officer Lisa Thompson appeared on screen. David, we've already drafted a statement, but honestly, your real-time response is more powerful than anything we could write. The live stream showed authentic leadership under pressure. Good. I want a full campaign. Dignity in flight. Launch across all channels within 48 hours. Budget? For comprehensive rollout? $75 million over 6 months. Approved. The executives were now frantically taking notes. Michael Torres looked up. David, you've just authorized $136 million in immediate spending. The board will need to approve. I'll present it to the board this afternoon as an emergency resolution. Anyone who objects can explain to shareholders why they voted against preventing discrimination. David turned his attention to the cabin. Several passengers were still recording, though more discreetly now. The businessman in 1A had put away his phone and was openly listening to the conversation. Patricia, David called over. She looked up, startled. You mentioned you've been flying American for 15 years. In that time, have you witnessed other incidents like this? Patricia hesitated, clearly aware that her answer was being recorded. Yes. Similar situations. I always assumed. You assumed the airline staff were making correct decisions about who belonged where. Yes. David nodded. That's part of the systemic problem. Passengers shouldn't have to rely on staff assumptions about who looks like they belong in premium cabins. He addressed the cabin generally. This is what institutional bias looks like. Not usually dramatic confrontations, but quiet assumptions that compound over time. The Instagram live stream had ended, but passengers were still posting updates. #Dignit in flight was beginning to trend alongside #American Airlines CEO. Angela, David said to his phone, I want passenger compensation protocols. Anyone who experiences confirmed bias gets full refund plus travel credits. No questions asked. That could be expensive if widely implemented. Less expensive than class action lawsuits and brand damage. What's the average cost per incident? Based on similar programs, approximately $2,400 per confirmed case. Implement it. And I want quarterly bias reporting published publicly. Full transparency, Chief Operating Officer Torres raised a concern. David, public reporting could make us look worse than competitors who keep their data private. Or it could make us the industry leader in accountability. Which would you rather be known for? The flight attendant Jessica approached cautiously. Mr. Williams, we'll be beginning descent soon. Is there anything else you need? Actually, yes. David stood up and addressed the entire first-class cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, what happened here today will result in concrete policy changes at American Airlines. I want you to know that you're witnessing this incident, your recordings, your social media posts, they matter. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Patricia. Ma'am, I'd like to invite you to participate in our new Dignity in Flight Advisory Committee. Would you consider helping us understand these issues from a passenger perspective? Patricia stared at the card, tears forming in her eyes. You want me to help? After what I did? Especially because of what you did. Real change requires honest conversation about unconscious bias. Are you willing to be part of that conversation? She nodded, unable to speak. David returned to his phone conference. Team, implementation timeline. Angela, training program launch. 30 days for full rollout. Legal, policy updates. 72 hours for documentation, 14 days for implementation. Technology, reporting app. Beta testing in 3 weeks, full launch in 6 weeks. Marketing, campaign launch. 48 hours for announcement, full campaign within a week. David closed his laptop. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just implemented the most comprehensive anti-discrimination program in aviation history. Total investment, $200 million over 18 months. Timeline, fully operational within 60 days. The cabin buzzed with murmurs. Passengers were texting, posting, calling friends. The businessman in 1A approached David with his business card. Sir, I'm a civil rights attorney. If you need any legal consultation on implementation... David smiled. I'll have our team contact you. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, the Instagram Live incident had sparked a national conversation about discrimination in travel. But more importantly, it had triggered immediate, measurable change. The corporate showdown was complete. Real power had been quietly, systematically deployed. 6 months later, the American Airlines headquarters conference room buzzed with quiet energy. David Williams stood before a presentation screen displaying real data that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. Discrimination complaints down 67% across all routes, he announced to the assembled board of directors. Customer satisfaction scores up 23% in premium cabins. Social media sentiment, positive mentions increased 340%. Board member Sandra Kim leaned forward. David, these numbers are remarkable. But what's the actual ROI on our $200 million investment? David clicked to the next slide. Revenue increase from improved customer retention, $340 million. New corporate partnerships from diversity leadership reputation, $127 million. Stock price appreciation attributed to positive social impact, 18% over 6 months. He paused for effect. Total return on investment, 234%. The room murmured appreciatively. CFO Robert Chen raised his hand. What about the specific programs? Which initiatives showed the strongest impact? The bias reporting app processed 12,838 reports in its first 6 months. Of those, 3,423 were confirmed discrimination incidents. Average resolution time, 3.2 hours. Customer retention rate for resolved incidents, 94%. David clicked again. Most importantly, repeat incidents involving the same staff members, down 89%. The zero-tolerance policy works. Patricia Montgomery sat in the back row of the conference room, notebook in hand. 6 months ago, she couldn't have imagined being here. Now she served as chair of the Passenger Advisory Committee, having become one of Americans' most effective advocates for bias awareness. During the break, she approached David. The training modules you asked me to review are ready. We incorporated feedback from 2,400 passengers who experienced discrimination incidents. How do they look? Honest, uncomfortable in the right ways. They force employees to confront their assumptions without being preachy. Patricia smiled slightly. I should know. I needed that same kind of uncomfortable honesty. The afternoon session focused on expansion. David presented Phase 2 of Dignity in Flight, industry partnerships. Delta, United, and Southwest have all requested licensing agreements for our bias reporting technology. JetBlue wants to adopt our training protocols. We're moving from company-wide reform to industry-wide transformation. Head of Human Resources. Angela Rodriguez presented her data. Peprosiki 127,000 American Airlines employees completed bias training. Post-training assessments show 78% improvement in recognizing unconscious bias scenarios. Employee satisfaction with diversity programs, 91%. More significantly, she continued, voluntary bias reporting by employees increased 445%. Our people are actively identifying problems instead of ignoring them. The technology metrics were equally impressive. CTO Kevin Park displayed the app dashboard. Real-time incident tracking across 350 airports. Average response time, 2.8 hours. Resolution rate, 97%. The system processes complaints in 12 languages and automatically escalates based on severity algorithms. But David knew the real measure of success wasn't in statistics. Board members, he said, I want to share something that wasn't in your briefing materials. He pulled up an email thread on screen. This is from Captain Sarah Chen, who was piloting Flight 468 6 months ago. She wrote, David, I've been flying for 20 years. In the past 6 months, I've seen more positive changes in passenger treatment than in my entire previous career. The cockpit crew reports are proof. Incidents requiring captain intervention down 73%. Another email appeared from gate agent Rebecca Chen in Dallas. The new protocols give us clear authority to address discrimination immediately. No more standing helplessly while passengers are mistreated. My job satisfaction has never been higher. Board member Thomas Wright, who had initially questioned the emergency spending, spoke up. David, I owe you an apology. 6 months ago, I thought you were making emotional decisions under pressure. These results prove you were making strategic decisions under pressure. There's a significant difference. David nodded acknowledgement. The pressure revealed an opportunity we'd been ignoring. Sometimes crisis forces necessary evolution. The meeting's final segment addressed long-term impact. Chief Marketing Officer Lisa Thompson presented external recognition data. NOACP Corporate Leadership Award. Time Magazine's Companies Leading Social Change list. Harvard Business School case study request. We've moved from crisis management to thought leadership. More importantly, she added, our Dignity in Flight campaign has 89% brand recognition among target demographics. We're not just an airline anymore, we're a symbol of corporate responsibility. Patricia stood up from the back row. May I share something? David nodded. 6 months ago, I was that person, making assumptions, causing harm without recognizing it. The old American Airlines would have handled my behavior quietly, maybe banned me, moved on. Instead, you invited me to be part of the solution. She looked around the room. I've now facilitated 38 bias awareness sessions for employees and passengers. Each session starts with my story, not as a victim, but as someone who learned to recognize their own prejudices. Her voice strengthened. That's real systemic change, not just punishing bad behavior, but transforming it into education. David clicked to his final slide. Phase 3, Global Implementation. We're partnering with international aviation authorities to establish industry-wide anti-discrimination standards. The European Union has requested our consultation on bias prevention protocols. The UN International Civil Aviation Organization wants to adopt our framework globally. He paused. Flight 468's 25 minutes of conflict has become a catalyst for international aviation reform. The board voted unanimously to expand funding to $500 million over 3 years. As the meeting concluded, David reflected on the transformation. The quiet man in the hoodie who had been humiliated in seat 2A had channeled that moment into systematic change affecting millions of travelers worldwide. Patricia approached him afterward. David, I have a question that's been bothering me for 6 months. What's that? When I was shouting at you, being awful, you stayed so calm. How did you know that staying composed would lead to this? She gestured at the conference room, the data, the transformation. David considered the question. I didn't know it would lead to this specifically, but I knew that anger would have led nowhere productive. Real power isn't about winning individual confrontations. It's about creating systems that prevent future confrontations. He smiled. Besides, you gave me something invaluable that day. What? A perfect case study in how unconscious bias operates. Your behavior wasn't uniquely terrible. It was typically terrible. That made it the ideal foundation for comprehensive reform. Patricia laughed despite herself. So I was useful, just not in the way I intended. The best catalyst for change often is. As they left the conference room, David's phone buzzed with a news alert. American Airlines Dignity in Flight Program, adopted by major airlines worldwide. CEO David Williams, named to Time's Most Influential People list. The revolution had begun with a shoved laptop bag in seat 2A. It had become an industry transformation. 1 year later, David Williams stood at the podium of the NAACP annual convention, looking out at 3,000 faces in the Chicago Convention Center, the same city where Flight 468 had landed 12 months earlier. A year ago, he began, I was just trying to get to a board meeting. I ended up in the middle of a live-streamed confrontation that would change not just American Airlines, but the entire aviation industry. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. That incident taught me something crucial. True leadership isn't about having power. It's about using your platform to create change that outlasts you. Behind him, a screen displayed current statistics. Dignity in Flight Program, 838 airlines globally participating. Discrimination incidents down 73% industry-wide. 2.3 million employees trained worldwide. David continued, Patricia Montgomery, the passenger who confronted me that day, is here tonight. She's been instrumental in training over 50,000 airline employees across 6 continents. The camera found Patricia in the audience. She stood and waved, receiving warm applause. What had begun as her worst moment had become her life's mission. But this story isn't about me or Patricia. It's about the power we all have to transform moments of injustice into movements for change. David's voice carried across the convention hall. These real-life stories matter because they show us who we can become when we choose dignity over division, systems over revenge, education over punishment. The speech concluded to a standing ovation. Later, at the reception, Patricia approached him. David, I have news. Southwest Airlines just hired me as their Director of Passenger Equity. Full-time position, 6-figure salary, reporting directly to their CEO. David smiled broadly. That's incredible. How does it feel? Terrifying and amazing. A year ago, I was unemployed after losing my marketing job. Now I'm leading diversity initiatives for a major airline. She paused. All because you chose to respond to my worst behavior with an opportunity for growth. You chose to take that opportunity. That's what made the difference. Across the reception, attendees shared their own stories. A gate agent from Denver described how the new protocols had prevented 3 discrimination incidents in 1 month. A pilot from Miami talked about the cultural shift in cockpit conversations. A flight attendant from Seattle shared how passenger complaints about staff bias had become passenger compliments about inclusive service. The numbers spoke for themselves. 12 major airlines had adopted Americans' full dignity in flight framework. 34 international aviation authorities implemented bias reporting systems. Harvard Business School, Wharton, and Stanford now taught the Flight 468 case study in leadership programs. Over 400,000 aviation employees worldwide had completed bias awareness training. But David knew the real measure of success was in the touching stories that never made headlines. The quiet moments when someone was treated with dignity instead of suspicion. when assumptions were questioned instead of acted upon, when conflicts were resolved through understanding rather than authority. As the evening wound down, David's phone buzzed with familiar notification sounds. Social media was celebrating the anniversary of the Flight 468 incident. The hashtags #Dignit, Flight and #Flight 468 anniversary were trending. Videos poured in from passengers, employees, and advocates worldwide. A black businessman thanked American Airlines staff for welcoming treatment at Chicago O'Hare. A Latina family shared how Southwest's new bias reporting app had resolved a seating dispute within an hour. An elderly Sikh man praised Delta employees for their cultural sensitivity training. Each story represented systemic change rippling outward from that moment in Seat 2A. David opened his laptop and began typing his anniversary reflection. 1 year ago, a 25-minute confrontation on Flight 468 became a catalyst for industry transformation. Today, millions of travelers experience more dignified, equitable treatment because one incident forced us to examine the assumptions we make about who belongs where. The lesson isn't that discrimination was solved, it's that progress is possible when we channel moments of injustice into movements for change. To everyone who shared their own Black stories, life stories, and experiences of bias, your voices created this transformation. To the airline employees who embraced difficult conversations about unconscious bias, your willingness to grow made systematic change possible. These touching stories of personal growth and professional transformation prove that our worst moments can become catalysts for our greatest achievements. David looked directly into the camera as local news interviewed him. Here's what I want everyone watching to understand. You don't need a CEO title to create change. Every interaction is an opportunity to choose dignity over division. Have you witnessed discrimination in travel? In your workplace? In your community? Share your real-life stories in the comments below. Your experience might be the catalyst someone else needs to speak up, stand up, or step up. If this story opened your eyes to the quiet power of systematic change over individual confrontation, share this video with someone who needs to see that transformation is possible. Subscribe for more stories that prove dignity always wins. And remember, you don't need permission to stand for what's right. You just need the courage to begin. The revolution that started with a shoved laptop bag had become a global movement. All because one man chose systematic change over personal revenge. All because one woman chose growth over defensiveness. All because witnesses chose documentation over silence. Real change begins with real stories. What's yours?